This is episode 14 of Store and Forward, a podcast about the past and future of amateur radio. I am K Savitz K6KJN. I am the curator of the Digital Library of Amateur Radio and Communications, and I am here with
I am Steve, NHGNJ, and I am the editor of the Zero Retries newsletter.
Happy New Year, Steve.
Happy New Year, Kay. So, there was a great cartoon. I don't think I sent it to you, but you'd appreciate it. There was a image of a three-panel cartoon of a cat sitting on a table with a image of 2025 sitting on it, and it looked at it, and then it
Knocked
knocked
it
it
off.
off. Perfect.
hmm
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. Um,
Um,
yeah.
2025 was had some interesting, good things happen, but I'm happy to see it fade into the past.
Yeah, I'm ready for something new for sure.
Amen.
Yeah, looking forward to good things in 2026.
Yep. Well,
So,
let's see. One of the highlights for me was the Zero Retries Digital Conference in September. We That had been a long time dream of mine to do a conference, kind of exactly the way I wanted it. And didn't turn out to be exactly what I wanted, but boy, was it close. And it was just so thrilling to be sitting in the audience as, you and many other speakers, told me about the things that I really cared about and, you know, um, really highlighted, as I tried to explain, highlighted not just those specific subjects, but an illustration of the incredible technological innovation that is going on in amateur radio right now that most people just don't know about. There's an interesting twist to this that I'll get to at later, that kind of makes things a little more interesting in 2026. So that
well,
was
okay,
that
well, I
was
was going
a
to ask
highlight for
if
me.
is it now that you did your dream of hosting a conference, are are you going to do it again now that you've done the work? And I mean, I
Yes,
was
we
there for a tiny amount of the work, just stuffing stuff into bags before the day before the show. I mean, and that took hours, and that was just, I'm sure, a tenth of a percent of the effort.
it really consumed us for most of the year, especially Tina. And one of the things that didn't go as planned was we sent a bunch of invitations out to academic institutions, but got very little response. And by the time we got spun up on that, probably in August, it was too late. So we really have to, for ZRDC 2026, we have to get spun up much earlier in the year, to get it. And we were in talks with another conference, to, kind of put ZRDC at their venue. That I don't know if that's going to come to fruition or not. It's not looking good because they just haven't stepped up to, with a positive response, and we have to get going. So we yes, there will definitely be another ZRDC. We don't know where, when. It won't be in. It probably won't be in September. We learned our lesson that September is this cursed month for, people doing their last gasp vacations and academia, and it's just a perfect storm of reasons why you can't attend a conference. It's
Sure.
the
If you're in academia or going to school, you're either in school or really thinking about getting back into that situation and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So it'll probably be we're like it's most likely to be sometime in October. I think that'll work out good.
Nice.
Yeah, but it was a great experience, and it was a lot of work, but it really paid dividends, and we keep hearing about the ripple, minor ripple effects from it. There were a lot of interesting connections made at the conference. We learned a lot. Um, you know, and we're probably going to do a better job of making it a hybrid event. So the remote participants can participate more fully instead of
Mhm.
just watching.
Yeah.
And it's and it's finally, and all the results are finally available, fully public, on the ZRDC page, and now on YouTube. That was
Mhm.
interesting. Yeah, YouTube is one of those things, probably like eBay, that seem more formidable, up front, than really are. And so it took me all of about 3 hours to really understand YouTube and start the Zero Retries YouTube channel,
Mhm.
which is really nice.
Nice.
So that's another thing I can talk about a little bit later for 2026. So
Nice.
what was your main highlight of 2025?
Um, I think the highlights as far as DLARC went were getting the grant renewal from ARDC so we can continue working on DLARC for another couple of years. Um, and and we scanned um, uh, three quarters of a million pages in 2025 of ham radio newsletters and manuals and other documents. And that's always satisfying to see that number,
Yeah,
I mean, 750,000 pages. And that's material that had never been available online before. And now it's there for everyone to download, and it's full text searchable. And I think man, that's real satisfying to me. Yeah. And that doesn't even account, the audio that we digitize and the CD-ROMs and the video and the reel-to-reel tapes and all the other weird, formats. Um, Pages, it's easy to count and easy to
I think
quantify.
I think one of the weirdest ones in the that was fun was seeing the Pernell Roberts clip from Trapper John MD talking about ham radio.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that was fun.
Yeah.
So there's a video that was done by oh oh who's the Walter Cronkite,
Hmm.
uh, who was a famous ham, and the ARRL sponsored that, and they had no idea what the restrictions were going to be because Cronkite was, under some contract that he wouldn't, after he retired from CBS News, he wouldn't do anything public anymore. So this very meticulously produced video was only available to be shown at like club meetings and things like that. The ARRL was absolutely crushed that they couldn't, give it to do public service spots on, TV, et cetera.
Hmm.
It could never be broadcast. It could only be, shown privately.
Mm.
So, there's stuff like that still
That's
out
probably
there.
why I haven't seen it.
Yeah. I saw
Yeah.
it. I saw it once, and they they were very jealous about distributing it.
Mm.
Like you had to, they sent you a videotape, with strong admonitions not to copy it because it couldn't get out from their control,
Right.
you know, for fear of being sued by CBS, the kind of stuff. So you had to promise not to make dupes of it, and you had to send it right back and things like that. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, I am just constantly in awe of all the treasures that you've poured into DLARC, and it's I subscribe to the RSS feed, and it constantly overflows the max number of articles that I can see on that RSS feed, and I just sometimes dip into it, and you're constantly discovering new newsletters, which is fascinating. So,
Yeah, they keep making them. And today being January 2nd, it means the beginning of the month is every month is newsletter season for me. And I just get a ton of newsletters from all around the globe and ham radio newsletters and add them all in. And so that's
yeah.
the thing.
What was the biggest score of, in previous years it was fair radio sales and the documents and Coop's, satellite, Bob Cooper's satellite cache, and that sort of stuff. So what was it for
Oh,
2025?
that's a great question, and I don't know if I have a good answer. It was just, uh, I mean, I am really proud. I'm really proud of the work that I did in finding and getting online the packet radio temporary notes. Um, these these were uh, uh, documents that were passed around about the early development of packet radio and when people were just, literally figuring out like how can we make packet radio work in the 70s and 80s. And these documents were never officially published, but they were passed around to people in the group, and I worked real hard and found many of them and got them online, and so we have this packet radio history that we that I got online. Not all of them. There's still actually quite a lot more to find, but finding any at all was kind of amazing to me. Um, so that was a big one for me. Um, and and just kind of the grinding on moving forward on getting many manuals and newsletters scanned and online. It's not real. I don't know. It's not a big. It was just a lot of little things just kept going, and that's how we got the 750,000 things scanned.
Agreed. So I constantly am dipping back into DLARC and, for reference material, as I write zero retries, because
Yeah.
so many times what we've done, about the only thing that really breaks new ground in this era is software defined radio.
Hmm.
That is a new technology that wasn't in existence, in the 20th century. Well, not so much in amateur radio, anyway. Um, and but other than that, I mean, it just constantly amazes me that I discovered yet another project to create a new TNC from scratch,
Hmm.
and this is like it's almost as in parallel with creating your own QRP CW HF radio. But everybody has an idea and they want to do it, and so they create new TNCs.
Right.
It's just funny, you know. Not to disparage it at all. It's just amazing. You would think it would have been done to death, just like QRP rigs, but nope. Everybody just keeps,
Right.
there's a constantly new ideas to try out.
Sure.
So yeah.
Sure. On that I don't it reminded me another thing that I'm really proud of that we added last in 2025 was the all the AMSAT stuff.
Oh yeah.
We got permission to add everything that AMSAT has ever published. So we have their newsletters that were published in the 80s and 90s. Their all their magazines, the AMSAT Journal and the AMSAT Satellite the amateur satellite report, and some of them are scanned from paper. Some of them we got on DVD, and we have every issue of some of the stuff, and they've been doing amazing work forever,
Yeah.
and having access to it is incredible. So
I was really proud to see that their Orbit magazine
mhm.
was published. I mean, that was a huge amount of work for a volunteer organization,
Yeah,
and it really kind of it in its era, it really kind of explained very well with color photos, and it was probably a 20-page magazine every other month or something like that, or quarter. I don't remember.
no, it was like a 80-page glossy full color. I mean,
Was
I
that
think
big?
it was pretty thick. Yeah, it seemed like a lot of work for, like you said, a volunteer organization. So yeah, And it didn't
Yes,
last forever because I mean I don't think how could it without unless you had a full-time staff,
right.
Yeah.
But in its era, it really popularized satellite operation. And that was the era when uh, we were still getting help from launch companies that would throw. The rocket was designed for 1 million pounds, and if the payload was 900,000 pounds, there had to be 100,000 pounds of ballast. So we were able to get you know launch opportunities, especially from the European Space Agency, and that was the era of the Phase 3 satellites, which just never quite made it.
Hmm.
One made it to orbit partially. One was blown up in a launch failure, and et cetera. So it was, but boy, we had the optimism, and we were cutting edge at the time. Now microsats are being done by not grade school classes, but certainly high school classes. So
Yeah.
yeah. So let's see what else. 2025. Oh, so speaking of software-defined radio, another highlight for me was, looking ahead, technological innovation in amateur radio was the emergence of the LIN-HT,
Hmm.
the Linux handheld transceiver. And that thing, I firmly believe that it's too good an idea not to happen, not to blossom. It's just going to take some manufacturer with courage to jump on this project and just take it forward in a commercial way. It's a complete open source design, and it's just amazing that you can now do full software defined radio on in a portable form factor. And you can run unmodified GNU radio flow graphs on a portable radio, which just blows me away. It's that we now can do SDR in such a power efficient and space efficient and compute efficient manner that
Hmm.
you can put it in a portable form factor. And the folks at the M17 project, there's 3 developers for this, 2 software developers and a hardware developer that put this together, and they came up with the brilliant idea of essentially damperizing a common portable radio made in China, and they disassembled it, mapped out the form factor of the one circuit board, all the interface, mapped out all the electrical interfaces. So you put it back together, put the LinHT board back into it with a few of pirated, or not pirated, but reused components like the volume control and the display, et cetera. And then it's a completely different capability than the original, which is just a commodity FM transceiver.
Hmm.
So that seeing that emergence of that is just it. One of my colleagues in the trying to advise M17 Foundation said, Bruce Perens, K6BP, said, "This is the most important project in amateur radio," and I have to agree. It is transformative, and it seems like it's plodding along, and it is plodding along because they don't have any grant funding, et cetera, but they're getting regular donations, and it's not a high intensity or high it's not dependent on a lot of resources. It's just time on the part of the developers, and all 3 developers are in Europe, which is kind of cool. So it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time, and this is it's true software defined radio. So they've ported. I think they've got a 2 megabit per second data mode already running on it. It can decode Tetra. It's of course does M17.
I don't know what
Uh,
Tetra is.
Tetra is a system, a trunking system, another digital voice that's more popular in like Australia
Hmm.
and New Zealand, and I think it's in use in the U.S. in like airports because they wanted something that was unique. And trunking is where you have a big bank of individual frequencies. And it's kind of like, it was kind of like pre-cellular, where you would, when you hit the push to talk button, there's a quick exchange between the radio and the base station, and the base station says, okay, switch to frequency 30, and that's available. And then next time you might be using frequency 32, or what. So it's a trunking system to make efficient use of spectrum, which is really tight in Asia and Europe, and less tight in the U.S. It was it yeah, I don't know. Anyway, Tetra is an exotic mode in amateur radio, and they, just for fun, they decided to see if this software defined radio could do it, and it can, at least receiving. So another thing I never imagined I would see in 2020, well, I never imagined I would see, let alone in 2025, was I went to Pacificon in October
Mm-hmm.
in San Ramon, California, which is in the Bay Area, and there was a amazing exhibit of what the title of the project is open.space. And if you literally type that into a browser, you find the project open.space. And it's they're making these little tiles that are individual software defined radios, antennas for 5 gigahertz. And you can couple these things together, not infinitely, but you can make probably a 5-foot panel antenna out of them. And they all work together, and it could be a phased array transmitter and receiver operating at 5 gigahertz. So they're one of the things that they illustrate the potential of is that you can do Earth, Moon, Earth communications at 5 gigahertz using this antenna. And amateur radio has expanded privileges in the 5 gigahertz band to be able to transmit at power.
Mm-hmm.
So this is doable. And, phased array antennas are practically magic to me. But it's all math. You have an individual element, and you excite it at a certain phase, and then the one next to it you excite at a slightly different phase, modulation angle. It's just, well, it's the basis for the first time I ever heard of phased array antennas was on the Aegis radars on Navy Aegis destroyers, U.S. Navy Aegis destroyers, and it's just a flat panel, but it has a 120-degree view without any moving parts, and it's amazingly fast and amazingly powerful. And now this technology has now drifted down to the point where it's an open source design, just freaking amazing. And he was at the very first time he showed this off in public was at an amateur radio conference. So technological innovation in amateur radio, baby.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and there's dozens of those kinds of developments, maybe not at that scale, but that happened in 2025 that I tried to publicize in Zero Retries. And it's just constantly amazing the stuff that flows in. Let's see, what was the other? So speaking of software defined radio, another highlight for me was, and it was kind of the genesis of ZRDC 2025, was GNU Radio Conference 2025, which was held in Everett, Washington. And that's a week-long conference on all things GNU radio. And when Tina and I discovered that, I talked Tina into helping to volunteer for it, being only 90 miles from where we live. And we went to the venue to help them out, scope a few things out, because the organizers of GNU RadioCon had never seen the venue. They just looked at it on the internet and said, we need a conference facility of such and such size, at such and such a price, at such and such a date. And that one worked, and they signed it sight unseen. So we went and checked out a few things that you could really do best in person, And we said, hey, this is a really nice facility. And we talked to the venue, and the pricing was reasonable, high but reasonable. Um, and so we decided to put ZRDC 2025 on Saturday, September 13th at the exact same venue. And we benefited a little bit from the synergy with, like, the AV didn't have to tear down on Friday evening. So they gave us a big break on the cost of the AV. It was plenty big enough. It was, for all the attendees. Well, you saw the, facility. So
Yeah, it was
anyway,
great.
GNU Radio Con was just a huge highlight. And I was amazed at the scope of stuff that's going on. And one of the best moments of GRCon for me was somebody said, well, we're having trouble finding people who have, experience with GNU Radio. Do you know of anybody, that's available that, for us to hire for GNU Radio? And the matter of fact response came back with, well, no, I don't know of anybody who's available, because everybody I know who has any experience at all with GNU Radio already has a good job. So boy, if you wanted, it's like back in our day, the funny phrase was plastics.
Hmm.
If you wanted a secure job for the rest of your life, get into plastics.
Yeah.
Nope. Now it's software defined radio.
Right.
So,
Nice.
and
So
what
when are
was
we going to be able to get uh, zero retries into DLARC? We've been talking about this for a
uh
long time.
yes. I am one of my goals was to get zero retries into Google's Notebook LM, which was a AI tool that was designed early on as a tool for writers like me.
Right.
So you could throw all your material. Unfortunately, it doesn't ingest websites or even HTML.
Hmm.
You have to basically give it PDFs. And I didn't know how to, do that at scale. And it was just a bit of a showstopper there. So I had some time during my vacation, or my travel time at the end of the year. It's amazing how productive you can get on a plane when you have internet access, and that's about all you can do.
Right.
So I started looking at this, and I discovered I had no idea Substack, the platform I'm using right now, has an export tool.
Hmm.
You can dump everything about your newsletter, including every issue, down into a um, clean export.
Nice.
And then all you got to do is, then train an AI tool to say, take this, file of the news of a particular newsletter, PDF it at scale. So
Nice. And the links, the links from the newsletter are real links and not going through
I
Substack.
hope
Yeah.
I may that that's one of my irritations about Substack. One of my many irritations about Substack. So
Yeah.
yes, I hope. Well, but what I hope, what sorry, in 2026, it won't be Substack.
Right.
Um, and to that end, I anticipated that it's not going to be a clean. I won't be able to do a clean conversion.
Yeah.
So I may just leave zeroretries.org in place on Substack. There's no penalty. There's no ongoing cost
Right.
for it. And I was able to negotiate with the good folks at the dot radio domain registrar. Um, they have a program that, if you are not a behemoth like a radio station, or et cetera, they will give you a very reasonable rate for a dot radio domain registration. So I now have zero retries dot radio, and that's where the 2026 and later version of zero retries will be at. So I may leave it in place so
Hmm.
those links work, and maybe make a Herculean project of 4.5 years of weekly issues,
Right.
cleaning them up, once and for all for posterity. It's funny looking back at some of the earlier ones. It's a lot more. I feel like the current zero retries is reasonably polished, and the early ones not so much. So yes, that is haunting in my ear that all this stuff was nearly lost had it not been for DLARC, and that I certainly don't want zero retries to get lost if, God forbid, Substack just decides to fold up for some reason.
Right. Well, yeah, it's big uh, media companies and publishing how they never just fold up and take their ball and go home. That's never happened before. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you need to have a backup for sure.
Well, another point of overlap between DLARC and zero retries was there was a lot of activity relating to amateur radio and the FCC this year,
Hmm.
and you got on it and started archiving. What describe what you do, the ongoing work that you're doing with archiving
Well,
FCC
okay,
stuff.
so that's been interesting because with the changes in the government administration this year, I was like, well, let's make sure everything's FCC is backed up as much as possible, and so I was doing the electronic comment system on and backing up some of the comments on some of the the topics that were very relevant to amateur radio. And then I was doing the FCC daily digests, which since the dawn of time, the FCC kind of does a little newsletter thing every day about like what happened, what they worked on, what passed, what meetings happened and things. And I just wanted that all backed up. And I did it up until I think it was like February. I'd have to check, but like February or March of 2025, and and got that all done. And then the government shut down for a while, and when it came back, um, the FC it was hard getting that information. The FCC's website was they did a nice job of trying to prevent uh, malicious downloaders and people from setting up bots to just whatever download everything for whatever reason. And so I managed to get it. It was a challenge. Um, and then when they came back, it was really a challenge. I mean, they put up more walls. They have made my life difficult in continuing to archive their work. So I'm not sure why, really. Why a government website would make it extra difficult to use their information, but they have done that. So, um, so I'm glad I got what I got, and if I'm going to go back and get more, it's going to be a Herculean effort to learn to climb that a new kind of wall, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that you know.
Well, I really appreciate that you grabbed all of the comments, that for amateur radio, I don't remember what to call them. The activity regarding relating to amateur radio, and there were several this year
Right.
or last year.
Let's
There
see if
was
I,
the 902 to 928 silliness. There was AST Space Mobile, deciding that they wanted a downlink
Oh
and
yeah, that bandwidth should be ours now. Let's take that away from everybody, and yeah, we want that for our business.
right.
Yeah, um, yeah, and let's see, there was 25 133, delete. That was a
Oh
big
yeah.
one. Um, People had all sorts of comments about what should be removed from FCC rules, and people had all sorts of opinions, and there are things that should be removed from the ham radio rules for sure. They didn't remove any of the important stuff that that I think should be deleted, the rate limits and things. But you know,
Well, they that's an interesting carry forward that we're really hot. We're really handicapped now in the U.S. because of the VHF, UHF symbol rate limits,
mhm,
which were eliminated from the HF bands, but not the VHF, UHF bands. And there's some interpretation to be done yet. Um, so I've had some correspondence that says basically that because the FCC asked the question at the end of, I don't remember what the VHF work about, they asked about VHF, UHF, um, that there's some people that imply that that means that the FCC will go back and think about it, and because there was a phrase in their further notice of proposed rulemaking, which I haven't yet heard a good definition of. And but then there were other people, and including one person who worked at the FCC, who talked to me, didn't want to be on the record,
mhm,
is who said basically this the fact that the FCC asked for comments was completely pro forma until somebody petitions the FCC. Nothing could possibly happen,
mhm,
further. So using the language in delete, 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 if we are very careful about, what we ask for, in that we say, we propose delete this phrase, and all of a sudden the symbol rate limitations go away. Then delete these phrases, and all of a sudden the bandwidth limits in VHF, UHF go away.
mhm,
And it's no new rules, no changes per se, other than just surgically excising these particular phrases. And all of a sudden we can start doing the fun stuff like is happening in Europe now with these wonderful new packet radios by a company called Localino in Germany, that now let us do real data rates, 1 megabit per second, as long as we have enough bandwidth
mhm.
available, even in 2 meters and 440. So, and that is a project for me. Not an immediate one. I've got other mechanical stuff like getting zero retries replatformed, and then this notebook LM stuff. But yeah, that is if nobody else is going to do it, I like charging into projects where, well, it can't hurt because nobody else is doing anything.
Right.
It's like a geo satellite for North America, for the Americas. It's like, well, AMSAT's missing in action, and this AMSAT CA that got formed supposedly to do this isn't doing anything. So why not raise a ruckus? And fortunately, I've got some co-conspirators in this who've come to the same conclusion. Says, well, it can't hurt to raise a ruckus, and it can't hurt to start contacting these. But there's a company. I did a story in Zero Retries in 2024 about a geo satellite. It was called a micro geo, which was a new concept for me. I thought if you were going to put something in geo orbit, it had to be big and strong and
Mhm,
long duration. But no, this company did a targeted geo satellite for Alaska, and it was completely under contract. Alaska sent them money. All of a sudden, the satellite shows up. A few months later, they handled the construction, the integration, the launch, the commissioning, and then turned it over to for
mhm,
use in Alaska.
mhm,
So why can't amateur radio do that? And in fact, there's been some movement about that. ARDC has said that one of their new focuses, or their refined focuses going forward, is going to be space activity, amateur radio. And so there's at least the possibility of being able to do something like that. But I keep looking at AMSAT and can't find any interest in doing so. And I queried AMSAT CA, and they said, well, maybe we'll get involved if somebody else does.
Hmm.
You know, and of all people, Europe wants to help do something in the Americas because Canada is a member of the European Space Agency.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's an infinite number of ways to occupy my time, related to zero retries. It's like the longer I go, the more interesting things I uncover. And so, and I share it with the zero retries audience. And, oh, that was another thing that came forward late in 2025 was besides the YouTube channel was I finally pulled the trigger on a zero retries email list, which is my version of social media.
Hmm.
I know that Discord is the more popular way to, create a interactive community, but it's it just is too fast paced and ephemeral for me,
Hmm.
the way I work. So an email list is much better for me. And I finally pulled the trigger, and that's been satisfying to see that take off. And I'm making very liberal use of hashtags, and um, I'll ask a question, and boom, the audience starts replying. And I turned off commenting in Substack and just redirected everything to the email list, and that seems to be working pretty well.
Nice. Yeah, I've enjoyed lurking on the list, and I agree with you. Some people love Discord. Bless them, but it just doesn't. I don't. I like that the email comes to me. I can browse it when I want to, and it doesn't scroll away unless I want it to,
Yes.
and then I can reference it later. Something on Discord, can where was that thing that I read 6 months ago? You're never going to find it, but in email you can.
Yep.
So anyway, I've enjoyed working on that, and so yeah, well done.
Thanks. And then one last thing that should be mentioned for 2025 was the IP 400 network project that I helped birth in early 2025. And by the end of 2025, I have no idea what's going on. I was the main developer, and I had a significant difference of opinion about, you know, just basically the promotion of the project, and he just kind of jerked the rug out from under me, and decided to go his own way. And since a big presentation at ZRDC in September, I have not seen any progress reports at all
Hmm.
about it. I have no idea what's going on with it. So I mean, and that's a real shame because I mentioned this in some discussions that Meshtastic, in operating an unlicensed spectrum, no requirement for an amateur radio license, obviously, is just growing by leaps and bounds. And now
Hmm.
there's like four different variants of being able to do mesh networking for casual chat in unlicensed spectrum using Meshtastic and LoRa at very low cost, very low barrier to entry, lots of fun, lots of community support. And amateur radio really doesn't have anything to compete with that. No reason to, you know, advance and get your amateur radio license and then be able to do even more cool stuff. IP 400 would have been that had it, continued on the trajectory that we had agreed upon early on, and then it kind of fell apart. So I have no idea what's going on with that, and that's to my profound disappointment. But that kind of stuff happens. There were organizations that I helped create that just have petered out.
Hmm.
Um, I can help. But I can't carry the ball for
Sure, you
them.
got to rely on other people, and sometimes that doesn't work out, but nothing lasts
Yeah.
forever, and you hope for the best and put the
Yep.
ideas out
Agreed.
there, and Cross your fingers.
Yeah. And let's see, looking at my one last quick glance at my notes. Um, and minor milestones, ARD or ZRD, zero retries, hit 3,400 email subscribers, which is the only hard metric I have available to me.
Hmm.
It's there's hundreds more that follow via social media, and pass along an RSS, and followers on Substack, which can't be measured. It's just that's yet another annoying feature of Substack. So 3,400, and in 2025, it was the fifth year. It began the fifth year of publication, zero retries, and that was, so it's other than a little bit of fumbling towards the end of the year because I had to do some unexpected travel and it didn't plan very well, towards the end of the year. So I'm taking a break, until the third Friday of January will be the first issue of Zero Retries in 2026. And so I'm reserving the rest, the 10 days or so to get the new platform up and running.
Great. Oh, I guess that means so I don't need to have my article to you on the ninth like usual, right?
Nope, you got a week off.
Okay.
Um,
All right.
and,
I'll move that to the next week. Okay.
and then the last item is that AI really started to get useful, not just in amateur radio, but be a useful adjunct to some of the activity that I do. I'm
Hmm.
increasingly well. The first few times I tried using AI, it was useless answers that were obviously bad. Like I asked, what one memorable query was, I asked for the uh, five biggest nations, the five biggest uh, populations of amateur radio by country,
Hmm.
and so I got is the usual, U.S., Japan, or actually Japan was number one at that on that list. Then it was the U.S. and blah blah blah. And I said, and I laughed out loud, and I said, and I asked it, well, what about China? And it gave me some weasel word excuse why it had not included China, in the population. And China has, a huge population of amateur radio operators. You
Sure.
just don't hear much about them because largely they don't interact with the rest of the world. It's entirely almost entirely an internal hobby in China. Um, but yeah, a huge number of Chinese amateur
Great.
radio operators. So by the end, I'm getting, I'm being able, I guess maybe I've learned to tailor my queries better, focus them.
It's such a mix. I mean, sometimes what you can get out of AI is absolutely incredible and super useful and time saving and sometimes it's just absolute garbage.
Yes.
Garbage. Yes, I mean I like it when when I ask for it, like if I want to use Notebook LM, which you mentioned before. Great. It's a tool I have there. Or if I want to use the the Chat GPT uh, API in order to feed something from DLARC into it and get a quick summary that I can use. Beautiful. If I ask for it, great. But when I don't ask for it, and it more and more of these companies are just like trying to give it to you, the AI, whether you want or not. For instance, you do Google and it gives you those AI summaries. First of all, as a person who publishes websites and allegedly makes money off those websites, every time one of those AI summary comes up, that's someone who is not going to visit a website. If they read that summary, it's right there on the page. They don't need to click through in order to, So they're but then the hallucinations are wild, just wild. Just yesterday, I was trying to find an old tweet of mine, and I searched for my last name and Y2K. Savitz Y2K. Because I was trying to, how did I phrase something one time? And I got a whole long AI instant Google summary about Stuart Savitz, who was a pioneer in researching the Y2K bug. And it's like, Stuart Savitz does not exist. Has never existed. Um, and it was this very convincing hallucination, just BS and that I don't know how or if that problem is going to be solved, but how do you trust anything? If a buddy who lies to you 40% of the time, how do you ever trust that buddy? Just
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So, but the cool one of the cooler developments that happened was we talked. There was a talk at um, ZRDC 2025 by Hunter Inman, who was frustrated. It was a new ham, um, and he was frustrated at participating in nets, on VHF, UHF repeaters,
Hmm.
and he had trouble, copying call signs and things, and keeping track of things. And it occurred to him that, oh, maybe I could, you know, do something with AI about this. And he created what he called the I'm going to butcher this name, transcribers transcription node or something like that.
I remember him talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and what was astonishing was that he not only he implemented this, but it was running locally on a Raspberry Pi, and it did make use of the internet, um, but purely in an accessory capacity. Like he would, when it parsed out a call sign, it would query the call sign on QRZ because it
Hmm.
had an API, and then to validate that it had parsed the call sign correctly. But that capability, running locally in amateur radio, for implementation, that was really cool. And speaking of internet and amateur radio, one last development that I was really happy to see in 2025 was that the what I had been calling the 44net virtual private network (VPN)
Hmm.
officially debuted and is now in production. It is now called 44net Connect, and it is a virtual private network for amateur radio use that will allocate you a block of IPv4 static addresses,
Hmm.
for your whatever use you want to do, as long as it's amateur radio related and you adhere to a few basic terms of service. You can't use it commercially.
Hmm.
Um, but, like for example, I'm talking on Starlink, which uses carrier grade network address translation, which means essentially it's impossible to come back into my system or my network from the internet. Uh,
Right.
if I'm going to have services that I want accessible, I have to expose them back up through Starlink
Hmm.
onto a server somewhere, and then the server talks. I'm constantly basically maintaining the connection from my side.
Yeah.
So that is exactly what 44net Connect is designed to do. And there's a heck of a lot of us amateur radio operators, especially in rural areas, that are using Starlink now and CGNet, and uh, 44net is an absolute 44net Connect is an absolute godsend.
Hmm.
It's just fantastic resource. That means, oh, and then there was a development that I just found out about is Let's Encrypt, which offers free HTTPS certificates.
Sure.
Um, Now lets you use them with just an IP address. It doesn't have to be associated with a domain name. So I can advertise my 44net IPv4 address, for accessing a particular service on mine, and coming in from the internet. Your browser won't complain because I can get this free Let's Encrypt certificate associated with it. So now I can't I'm not supposed to be using encryption if it's going over RF on amateur radio
Hmm.
because of the restrictions there. But it's I don't know how it's been with you, but I have to go through like 3 layers of hoops to be able to use an HTTP web server on my current browser. It just every update of Mac OS or iOS makes that a little bit harder,
Right.
because they really don't want you to fall into nasty stuff. And so I,
Which
I
makes sense for 99% of the population, but sometimes when you're a geek and you know what you're doing, you do need to or want to go to an unsecured HTTP website and have it all be out there and exposed, and it doesn't matter, you know. Yeah,
well, like a perfect example is a lot of older equipment that provide you with a web interface,
sure.
to be able to manage it. They had no concept of secure HTTP. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
and then trying to use it on a modern browser is oh my gosh.
Right.
If you, of course, you can query AI and find out how to put a permanent exemption for one particular IP address. That this dynamic that's really frustrating. So
Yeah.
anyway, that was 44 Net Connect was another welcome development in 2025,
Nice.
and yeah, brought to you by the fantastic people at Amateur Radio Digital Communications, which provides DLARC and many other worthy projects in amateur radio with grant funding, to do interesting things in amateur radio. So, and they're going strong in 2026, and with this particular project, 44 Net Connect consumed an awful lot of their time and resources in 2025, and now that they've gotten this launched, they're going to be doing a lot of interesting stuff. One interesting thing, kind of relating to both of what we follow, is that in 2025 they will be they're spinning up a new volunteer
In
team called the
2026.
sorry
2026.
you're right. So in 2026 they're spinning up a brand new team called the Grants Communications Team, which the goal of which is to close the loop on all of the grants that they funded to date with at least a summary, if not a full report, on every grant that they've um, you know provided. So how did it end up?
Hmm.
How did things go? What were the lessons learned, et cetera? And they've done some of this. Um, there's a few projects that I followed, that I really wanted some updates, and they did those on an exceptional basis. But they made the point very reasonably when I complained about this that um, we've got a few other higher priority projects to do before this, and that was a point well taken. So I'm glad to see in 2026 that they will be doing this, and that's you know more transparency, more knowledge into being available in amateur radio.
Sure.
So the very last item I had was that in this very last issue of Zero Retries for 2025, there is a new book that is, or there will be a new book by ARRL, uh, Digital Amateur Radio Networking. I think that's the right title. And I kind of broke this story into public in Zero Retries because a Zero Retries reader forwarded this to me, and the ARRL is taking an interesting approach for this book, in publicizing it to clubs, and they're offering to let clubs essentially subsidize the book by getting a listing of their club and individual amateur radio operators listed in the book, kind of like almost like a Patreon,
Right. Kickstarter
function.
sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of,
Yeah.
but and it's going to go straight into the production cost of this book.
Sure.
So not only is the ARRL is finally getting back in the data communications, game. The last version of this book, or the predecessor of this book, was last published in 2016. So that was really welcome news, and I I got in touch with the person who was managing that project, and it's looking really good. The this book will be interesting, and finally something interesting to purchase when an interesting book to purchase when I go to HRO in Portland, check in with you and my daughter. So that'll be cool, and that's coming out hopefully in the first quarter or so of 2026.
Excellent.
Yeah, that was a really welcome development. So and more fodder for me to get going on my book. So that yeah, after after I get Zero Retries replatformed, I get it exported into Notebook LM and DLARC. Book is project 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Okay. Holding you to it.
And yeah, and as you pointed out from your book writing experiences, I think it was a pretty memorable quote. It went something like, "Have you ever written a book?" I said, "No." He says, "Well, writing a book sucks, but having written a book is fun."
Yes. A book is a great thing to have written. Yes.
Yes. So
hmm
yeah.
Yes,
So
indeed.
anyway,
Well, I look forward to reading the book after you have written yours.
well,
All right.
yeah. So that's there all kinds of interesting projects in 2026. So I'm looking forward to 2026. And just kind of get better at this. A month at a time, and getting processes streamlined. And I'm actually looking. If I get all of Zero Retries ported into Notebook LM, oh, I am looking forward to great things. It'll be like having an assistant, you know. So having
Excellent.
all that stuff easily accessible. So,
Cool.
oh wow, we just ran over an hour.
Yeah.
Fun talking to you, Kay.
A tight 65 minutes. This has been
Yep.
Store and Forward, your podcast about the past and future of amateur radio. I am Kay Savitz, K6KJN. I am the curator of the Digital Library of Amateur Radio and Communications, which is your free online amateur radio library. Please check it out at archive.org/details/DLARC. I guarantee you'll find something interesting that to learn about or do or contribute. And you are Steve.
I'm Steve Stroh, NAGNJ, and I'm editor of the Zero Retries newsletter. And the new domain that's a little easier to say is zeroretries.radio. And right now that redirects to the Substack version of the newsletter, but later in January 2026, it will redirect to the new version of Zero Retries newsletter. So again, Zero Retries, ZeroTries.radio.
Excellent. Make me update the Chiron.
Yeah. Yep.
Make it
So,
work for me. All right. Well, I'm glad we got
wow.
back
Of
to
course.
doing this, and let's do it. Let's make
Yes.
ham radio great in 2026.
Amen. Thanks, Kay.
Thanks.
7-3.
7-3.